The afternoon of August 16th, 1977. The world was told a sudden, tragic story. A king died of a heart attack. But in the sterile, air-conditioned rooms of Graceland, a different, more terrifying truth unfolded. Who truly watched over the king in those final hours? The official reports were deliberately vague. The local Memphis police, under immense pressure, chose to overlook crucial details found in the initial autopsy. Today, this channel will unveil the hidden narrative, the testimony of the single, unnamed witness whose account, if fully pursued in 1977, would have forced the reopening of the case and led to criminal charges. This is the story of medical malfeasance, enabling, and the shocking betrayal that preceded the fall of the king. By the summer of 1977, the gilded facade of Elvis Presley had cracked entirely. The glamorous Vegas jumpsuit was now a costume for a man struggling to breathe. His performances were often incoherent, plagued by drug-induced forgetfulness. Yet his final days were not spent in a hospital, but in the chaotic, unsupervised environment of Graceland. He was not just a superstar, he was a medical patient requiring constant, vigilant care. Care he was systematically denied. His body was failing, weighed down by dozens of pounds and a cocktail of narcotics. The stage was set for a disaster, a tragedy that everyone around him saw coming, but no one dared to stop. Just weeks before his death, Elvis was handed a psychological death blow. The publication of the tell-all book, Elvis. What Happened? Written by 3 former bodyguards he considered family. The book detailed his dependency, his paranoia, and his grotesque physical state. He was enraged, wounded, and deeply paranoid. He spent his final weeks consumed by the betrayal, trying to buy the book back, consumed by a darkness that was now external, not just internal. This betrayal pushed him past the psychological breaking point, hastening his final desperate self-medication. To understand his death, one must understand his life's most dangerous relationship, the one he shared with Dr. George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick. Dr. Nick was more than a physician. He was an enabler, a friend, and ultimately, the legal vehicle for Elvis's self-destruction. In the final 8 months of Elvis's life, Dr. Nick prescribed 10,000 doses of sedatives, amphetamines, and narcotics. Imagine that number, 10,000 doses. This was not medicine. This was pharmaceutical Russian roulette. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, but the truth was a slow, government-sanctioned overdose. Graceland operated less like a home and more like a high-security pharmacy. It is alleged that Elvis carried his pills in a black bag, often consuming them in multi-dose handfuls. Dr. Nick later claimed he was trying to wean Elvis off the drugs, but the sheer quantity of prescriptions tells a different story. A doctor desperate to keep his famous, wealthy patient happy and dependent. The Memphis Mafia, those closest to him, watched this fatal dance from the sidelines. They did not intervene. They merely refilled water glasses and delivered the next requested vial. Their silence was his death sentence. The final fatal cocktail was ingested on the morning of August 16th. Sources suggest it included massive doses of codeine, quaaludes, and other powerful sedatives, far surpassing any safe therapeutic limit. The question the Memphis police refused to ask was simple. Who administered the final dose? Dr. Nick was not present, but someone had to have facilitated the intake. This detail, the who and the why of the final dosage, is the key that unlocks the tragedy, and it leads us directly to the unnamed witness. The last 2 days of Elvis's life were a blur of restlessness, pain, and paranoia. On August 15th, he visited his dentist, who administered yet more painkillers. Later that day, he made a final, pathetic request to visit his girlfriend, Ginger Alden's mother. This wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a desperate attempt to find connection and normalcy outside his gilded prison. But the drugs had already begun their work. The man who owned the world was now losing the battle for his own mind. On the night of the 15th, Graceland was quiet but tense. Elvis stayed up reading and trying to process the betrayal of the bodyguard's book. He felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly alone. He called associates, desperately trying to formulate a plan to discredit the book, not realizing his time was running out. He consumed a variety of medications throughout the night, attempting to calm his agitated mind and soothe his chronic pain. His final actions were not those of a man preparing for bed, but of a desperate patient trying to escape reality. This brings us to the most guarded secret of Graceland. The media claimed Ginger Alden found him unresponsive, but the movements and medications consumed immediately preceding the tragedy had an observer, a member of the household staff whose name was quietly scrubbed from the public record. This witness observed unusual activity, a significant ingestion of pills just hours before he was found, and the delayed reaction of those closest to him after the discovery. Their signed affidavit, buried for decades, confirms that the emergency response within Graceland was slow, chaotic, and possibly compromised. We will now look at the specific, damning details this witness provided. When Elvis was found, the scene was one of shock and immediate damage control. The decision was made swiftly. Protect the brand, protect the doctor, and protect the myth. The subsequent autopsy was a medical tragedy in itself. While internal experts pointed to drug toxicity as the clear cause, the official public ruling was quickly shifted to cardiac arrhythmia, a vague term that shielded Dr. Nick from immediate scrutiny. The official report stated no drugs contributed to his death. This was a deliberate institutional lie designed to comfort the mourning public and protect a criminal enterprise. The Memphis police investigation was cursory at best. Under immense political and public pressure, they failed to properly secure the scene, interview key witnesses immediately, or pursue the obvious drug trail that led straight to Dr. Nick's prescription pad. The unnamed witness's account was marginalized, deemed too volatile for the public narrative. The local authorities essentially granted the Presley estate and Dr. Nick immunity in the name of preserving the peace and the legend. The truth was sacrificed on the altar of celebrity worship. Dr. Nick was eventually charged but later acquitted in 1981, his lawyers successfully arguing that his patient's self-destructive behavior was to blame. However, the evidence compiled by the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners told a different story, detailing his reckless overprescribing. The final judgment on Dr. Nick was not rendered by a court of law, but by his medical peers, who permanently revoked his license. He escaped criminal jail time, but his career was ruined, a small victory against a large injustice. 40 years later, the Graceland gates remain open, a shrine to the king, but the mystery of his death still haunts the narrative. The unnamed witness, whose silence was bought and whose testimony was buried, remains the final conscience of the tragedy. Their story confirms that Elvis Presley's death was not a sudden act of fate, but the inevitable conclusion to a years-long tragedy, enabled by those who loved his fame more than they loved the man. Did anyone truly try to save him? The real tragedy is the man we lost, a talented, volatile, deeply complex figure whose kindness was often overshadowed by his dependency. Priscilla left him to save herself, but even her escape couldn't derail the catastrophic path he was on. His fall serves as the ultimate cautionary tale of celebrity, power, and the terrifying willingness of those in power to look the other way. The music plays on, but the silence he left behind is deafening. The truth is always harder than the lie. Elvis Presley died because he was allowed to. He died because his money protected his doctor and his fame protected the myth. The testimony of the unnamed witness is the final chilling indictment of the system that failed him. The legend of Elvis survives, but the man remains buried under the weight of an official lie. If you believe the truth deserves to be heard, subscribe now to Graceland Secrets. Next week, we explore the shocking betrayal, how Elvis's own guards conspired to leak his most embarrassing secrets. You won't want to miss the ultimate Mafia showdown.